these things for people of all colors, and I know that matters to you, doesn't it? This voting thing is just going to have to wait.
It can't wait, Mr. President.
Well, why not?
Because there have been thousands of racially motivated murders in the South, including those 4 girls.
Well, I know that.
And you know the astounding fact that not one of these criminals who murder us when and why they want has ever been convicted.
Yeah, I know we have a lot of work to do down there.
Not one conviction, because they are protected by white officials chosen by an all-white electorate, and on the rare occasions that they face trial, they are freed by all-white juries. All white because you can't serve on a jury unless you are registered to vote.
Well, Dr. King, you've certainly given me something to think about, but this administration is going to set this aside for a while. Just for a while, you understand?
Yes, Mr. President, I understand.
The big controversy seems to be how they treated LBJ.
Right, that is the big
And so, my key question for you, you were there. You have a lot of experience with it. Of course, my buddy Spider Martin, one of my best friends of all time, was there.
Yeah, he was certainly there.
And so I suspect what I'm going to find when I see this movie is that they may have kind of hit the wrong note on LBJ, but maybe both sides of that story are actually probably true. There's some truth in there.
That's possible. I'll tell you where I came down on it. I came down pretty much where Bill Moyers did, who of course was there with LBJ. He said he thought it was a film that everyone should see because it reminds us of the time when human rights were much more national concern. And also that he thought it was a distorted representation of the King and the King-Johnson relationship. And that's pretty much, as a journalist and historian who had a lot of experience in that era, that's pretty much where I came down. I did not cover the Selma March. I was in Birmingham, and I covered what turned out to be the death watch for Reverend Jim Reeb, who was attacked in Selma. And it's interesting, in the film, they show Reeb dying on the street there. In fact, he was brought by ambulance to Birmingham, UAB, and he died 2 or 3 days later, and that was a part of the larger story. That kind of dramatic license, I think, is perfectly acceptable. The man was killed. The wound was mortal where it was administered, even though he died later. I'm more dubious about what they do with Johnson, and I hope I'm wrong about the motive. But in a way, I felt like they put some of Kennedy's doubts and even offenses against King onto Johnson, perhaps to make Kennedy look better in comparison, because the historical record is clear that Johnson was friendlier to King, friendlier with King, and more committed to getting legislation through than Kennedy had been. Well, let me add, that's not fair to Kennedy. He drafted the 63 Civil Rights Act, which became the 64 Act. So he did do that. But his relationship with King was very wary. Bobby went south to try to get Martin Luther King and Fred Shuttlesworth to call off the Birmingham demonstrations. They were aware that Hoover was spying on King. Mrs. Kennedy has said, Jacqueline Kennedy, the widow, has said that before the 1963 March on Washington, her husband told her they had wiretaps of King and women. It's ironic that Jack Kennedy would be ratting out another philanderer.
Right.
But so I think that the tilt with Johnson is they don't show. It's not an accurate depiction of the fullness of the relationship. Every relationship has conflict, and there's no doubt Johnson would have been happier if there were not demonstrations. But his commitment to the cause, and I think his understanding of King were both deeper than Kennedy's. That said, I think the portrayal by Wilkinson, the actor Wilkinson, is marvelous, and you get the feeling that you're seeing the real Lyndon Johnson, including the looming physical presence. So
Okay.
that's about where I come down.
Okay. So the whole overall story, do you think it's a pretty good telling?
I think it is. Yeah, I do. And the one thing that I feel good about is sort of the center pole scene between George Wallace and Lyndon Johnson. Wallace says he lacks the power to order voter registration because the county officials have charge of that. And in the movie, Johnson leaned forward and said, "Don't you shit me, George Wallace." And in fact, that did happen. And one of the sources for that line is my book, My Soul is Rested. Nicholas Katzenbach, the Attorney General, was there and told me about it. And then two other witnesses, Richard Goodwin and one other eyewitness, have written about it in their memoir. So there's no question that line, which is the most shocking line in the film, is absolutely accurate.
Okay. Now, there's also a controversy about the Oscars treatment of Selma, and that kind of some people feel it got snubbed.
Yeah.
Is it possible that their treatment of Johnson had anything to do with being snubbed by the Oscars?
I would doubt that very much. I mean, let's be realistic. Hollywood is not a hotbed of accuracy.
Well, that's true.
And I think if a movie's successful, they're not going to worry about that.
What do you make of this controversy that it's all, it seems like an all-white slate of Academy Award nominees this time?
I don't even
thought
know
about
who's
it?
nominated.
Okay.
Haven't thought about it at all. Certainly, I think the film was a film that would rise to the category of being considered for Oscar nominations, and I thought both Wilkinson and the actor who played Martin Luther King would be worthy of consideration.
You did?
Now, how they stack up against the other nominees, I
Don't
just
know.
don't know. Haven't looked.
Alabama. There, long-suffering men and women peacefully protested the denial of their rights as Americans. Rarely in any time does an issue lay bare the secret heart of America itself. The issue for equal rights for the American Negro is that issue. For this issue, many of them were brutally assaulted. There is no Negro problem. There is no Southern problem. There is only American problem. The Constitution says that no person shall be kept from voting because of his race or color. To correct the denial of this fundamental right, this Wednesday, I will send to Congress a law designed to eliminate these illegal barriers. The bill will strike down voting restrictions in all elections, federal, state, and local. And we shall do this. We shall overcome.